What's up, Endgame community? I'm Pierre, he's Chris, and we're here to talk about some of the guys that are booms for Week 12, those players that have week winning upside potential. So let's start with your first pick, Chris. Who you like in Week 12?
Well, there hasn't been much booming lately for Ja'Marr Chase after a beginning of the season that was full of booms, but I think he gets back to it here in Week 12, going up against the Steelers defense that is absolutely reeling right now. Last week against the Chargers, Mike Williams had a huge day. Keenan Allen had a huge day. So with Ja'Marr Chase, still a guy getting a ton of targets, still getting a ton of red zone and deep ball looks, he's got a huge boom potential, and against this defense, I think he gets it done. I think he ends up being one of the highest scorers in Week 12.
I think not only does he come back this week, I agree with you, he could come back in a big way. Speaking of coming back, Russell Wilson going back to Seattle his last two games was supposed to reinvigorate that offense, especially coming off the bye, and it's done the opposite. They somehow look worse, and that has brought receiver DK Metcalf from a guy who, well, you had to start him. Even with Geno Smith, he was doing pretty well the last couple of games before the bye, and now suddenly he hasn't even been a top 50 fantasy receiver. 26 yards, 31 yards with Russell Wilson at quarterback. But I think Washington and that football team's defense could be the get-right spot. That secondary is still giving up some of the most yardage to wide receivers. They're bottom 5 in that category. And DK Metcalf is a guy that, even though he hasn't produced, still got 8 targets each of the last 2 games with Russ. So I think that you have to keep him locked in there. And he's a guy that, you know, when he comes back in a big way. He could go off at any moment. All right, Chris, who's your next boom pick?
I'm going to say David Montgomery is going to boom. Going up against the Lions, one of those defenses that he boomed against down the stretch last year when he won everybody their fantasy football championships. I know it's been tough the last 2 weeks since he's been back from injury. Hasn't really got it done. Has only combined for 17 fantasy points in those 2 games. But he played 95% of the snaps last week, so the opportunity is there. The offense has been terrible. That's definitely what's been holding him back. But I do think with Andy Dalton now being named the starter here on this short week, I actually think that helps the offense temporarily. Obviously, Justin Fields is the future, but I think Andy Dalton gives this offense a better chance right now. And in this matchup against a Lions defense still giving up the second most points to running backs, David Montgomery is in a great spot to have one of those huge games and remind everybody why he was a solid RB2 in drafts this season.
I was expecting a good game from last week. Didn't quite happen, not through his own fault. Detroit is definitely a spot where you have to roll him out. And let's go with another Thanksgiving Day game. The Raiders and the Cowboys. With the Dallas Cowboys, you know Amari Cooper is set to miss. CeeDee Lamb might also miss. That could leave Michael Gallup as the number 1 receiver in this offense. Even if Lamb clears the protocol, Gallup is still going to be heavily involved, just like he was this past week. Got 10 targets. I'm not saying it's a smash spot because the Raiders secondary has been pretty good this year, but then we've seen them kind of fall apart the last couple of weeks. So I think Gallup, he's going to get the targets. We know he has that upside. He's a guy who can make big plays, kind of like Ja'Marr Chase you talked about earlier. So I think you got to roll out with Gallup because he definitely has boom potential, and I like his chances this week. All right, who else do you like in Week 12?
I like another receiver who started the season off booming and has had a tough stretch here, but it looks like there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and that is DJ Moore because he has Cam Newton now. Led the team in targets, 5 catches, 50 yards, and a touchdown. Not a huge day, but certainly a much better day than we've seen the last 5 or 6 games. And you got to like him even more now in Week 12 because, no offense, it's your Dolphins, and this defense can't stop anybody. They were giving up yards and points to the Jets in Week 11, so if they do that to the Jets, I feel pretty good they'll do that against the Panthers. So DJ Moore with Cam Newton looks like he's reviving his fantasy value. I think not only is DJ Moore now an every week must start once again, but he's a guy who can go off on any given week. And in this matchup, it makes sense that it'll happen here. So get him in your lineup because he's going to boom in Week 12.
Yeah, no offense taken. Starting against the Dolphins is definitely a good idea there. So Melvin Gordon, why do I like him in Week 12? Well, he's playing the Chargers, revenge game narrative, end of story. Okay, well, it goes a little deeper than that. I mean, it's been long enough. I don't think that he's too worried about playing his former team, but the Chargers are still one of the worst run defenses in the league. Gordon is getting enough touches that you gotta like his chances. Coming off a bye week too, I think Denver is definitely gonna be able to game plan against the Chargers and do what they've been doing, and that's establish a ground game, kind of protect the ball and do what they want to do by running first and foremost. So I like Gordon. I do like Javonte Williams too, but Gordon, we've seen, is getting a little bit more of the goal line work, and so I like his chances just a little bit better, and the revenge game thing too. All right, Chris, let's keep going. Give me another boom.
Well, you had DK Metcalf as a boom. I'm going to have Russell Wilson as a boom. I know it's been a terrible 2 weeks since coming back from the finger injury, but if there's ever a spot to rebound, it's the football team. What has Russell Wilson been missing these last 2 weeks? Those big plays, right? Those huge chunk yards, chunk touchdowns. What is a football team really good at giving up? Huge chunk play touchdowns. This seems like a perfect opportunity for Russell Wilson to have one of those 3-4 touchdown type of games. And don't forget, Chase Young unfortunately lost for the season, so this pass rush isn't even good anymore. So he should have plenty of time to let plays develop, let guys get open. I expect him to have a monster week here in week 12 and remind everybody why he's still one of the best quarterbacks in football.
Yeah, like if the Seattle doesn't get right on offense this week, it's panic time. It's just downright panic time, but I think they will. All right, so I mentioned how bad the Chargers' run defense is, but we know who the king in that category is. It is the New York Jets. They're giving up the most rushing touchdowns in the league, and it's by a far margin. Giving up 20 rushing touchdowns. The next closest, the Texans, 15. And of course, they're giving up the most to running backs, but you know what else? Quarterbacks can run it in on the Jets. Anybody can run it in on the Jets. And I like Tyrod Taylor because guess what he did last week? He ran in 2 scores. The Texans don't really have a running back. I mean, they kind of do technically, but who is it? Is it Rex Burkhead? He's the lead rusher now, I guess. David Johnson. Tyrod Taylor could lead this team in rushing this week, and I think he could easily run in at least 1 score on the ground. And I think he'll have his way in the air too. I really like Taylor's chance for a big game, and alongside Brandon Cooks should rebound as well. Had a down game last week, but I like that tandem. But look, Taylor's going to run in. I guarantee he'll run in at least 1 touchdown on the ground. All right, those are our picks, guys that we think might absolutely go off in week 12. Let us know what you think. All right, guys, good luck in week 12.